Brian Lynn here, and this is my final part of the four-part talk on medical teaching feedback 101. In this final segment, we are going to focus on objective number 4, which is the use of effective phrasing for providing verbal feedback to learners. So when it's time to actually give feedback, it's important to set the stage well. And to do that, you want to create a really supportive environment for your learner. Firstly, make sure they know that feedback is going to be a part of you working together. Normalize it. Create a supportive environment. You might use phrasing like, I want to support you in the best way possible. Would you be open to feedback with each other as we work together? Making feedback reciprocal is another important part of this. You also want to elicit your learner's goals. What would you like to get out of our time together? How can I help you get there? This will help open the door to feedback as a means in which you're going to help them to improve. Your body language is really important when you set out to give feedback. Tone of voice should be even, flat, empathetic, and warm, sincere, and non-judgmental. Body language is also really important. Really good eye contact, your face being congruent with the effective feeling you're giving, your pacing being slow, your posture being open. It's actually best to kind of sit at a 45-degree angle rather than face-to-face with somebody when you're about to give them feedback. And you want to make sure that the spacing between yourself and the learner is adequate, where you are at or below their eye level, and you're leaning in a little bit as you give that feedback. So when you set out to give feedback, you want to make sure that you do a lot of information gathering in order to give that feedback well. So direct observations are going to be really key to this. It can be helpful even to scribble down some actual behaviors you see and the words they use so that when you talk to them, you can repeat back that language. And the kind of phrasing you want to use is to say things like, I saw, or I heard, or I noticed. Use I statements, talk about the things that you actually directly observed, rather than using more judgmental language like, you were this, or defensive, angry, or you were that. When it comes to actually giving feedback, consider using this, the artful method. Ask, respond, and tell. Firstly, you want to ask permission to give feedback, positive or negative. It's always important to make sure you assess your learner's readiness to receive it by using phrasing like, is this a good time for feedback? Now you may have already introduced that you were going to give feedback at the beginning of a session or the beginning of the time working with your student, but you still always want to make sure that you ask that question right in the moment. It's also important to name what you're doing. I'm going to give you feedback now. Otherwise, your learner may not even recognize that what they're receiving is feedback. Give specifics if needed. When you begin to give the feedback, you're first going to ask, what would you like to continue doing? Or what would you like to stop doing? Or what would you like to start doing? This is a good time to ask for your learner's self-assessment on any goals that you may have discussed with them earlier in their learning experience. And make sure that you do generous listening. You really want to listen carefully to the answers that they give you so that you can go on to the next step. The next step is to respond to your learner's statements. And what you really want to do at this point is just reflect back or paraphrase the learner's responses and perhaps use one or two of these statements, these pearls, in order to do that. P for partnership. I'd like to work with you on this. E, empathy. It sounds frustrating not to get the result that you wanted. A, acknowledgement. That was a difficult situation to be in. R, respect. I can see how much you tried to connect. L, legitimization. Most people find similar situations challenging. Or S, support. I am committed to helping you achieve your goal. You don't need much of this, maybe just one or two of these statements, but this can help to get your learner in tune with what you're trying to do and make them more receptive to the next step. The final step is to tell your learner your assessment. You're going to provide your assessment grounded in behaviorally specific language. When the patient told you that he was afraid of what was causing his dizziness, I noticed that you had your eyes on the computer screen and said nothing. The patient paused briefly and then reiterated his fear twice before you turned your eyes back toward him. Do you remember that happening? How do you think the patient felt? How else might have you responded? So using this part of the artful method, You're assessing the situation, you're commenting on the behavior, you're talking about the impact of that behavior, and then providing an opportunity for some coaching on how your learner may have done better. So let's put Artful to work and take a look at some reinforcing feedback. This is the comfortable kind, the kind that's easier to give. So Ryan, how do you think that interaction went with the last patient?
I think it went really great. I made a good connection with her. I think I hit all the historical pieces really well. I did a really thorough physical exam. I felt really good about that one.
Cool. So thinking specifically about, why you made such a good connection with her, what would you like to continue doing?
Yeah, I think asking a lot of probing questions, sitting nearby the patient, looking her straight in the eye, really helped a lot for her to trust me and me to get the full story.
Awesome. I completely agree with you. I think that, I watched you in the room. I saw that you immediately sat down next to her, that you shook her hand, that you made eye contact right away and often, and you really made a strong effort to connect with the patient. And you could tell, just by the way that she was responding to you, that you were doing a good job. So I would definitely recommend you keep up those good habits like you were showing, sitting down with the patient, a strong handshake, making eye contact. These are all really good habits, and I think you did a great job at it. So try and keep it up.
Thanks, yeah, felt good.
Cool. So that was an example of some reinforcing feedback, and again, that's kind of the easy one. Let's now take a look at some constructive feedback, which is the less comfortable kind. So Ryan, I wonder if this would be a good time for us to do feedback on that last case?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, cool. So how do you think it went?
So I think it went pretty well. I was hitting all the points with the history and the physical, but there were some parts that I really just felt uncomfortable with.
Okay. Specifically, what parts are you uncomfortable with?
Yeah, I think I'm just not used to talking and asking patients about their sexual history. That still feels very odd to me.
Okay, all right. Well, like we talked about in the beginning of the session, I know that trying to get a more fluid history is one of the things that you're really working on, and I'm really committed to helping you with that goal. So I'd like to kind of talk to you about some feedback related to that.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So tell me more about what it is in taking the sexual history in that particular situation that was uncomfortable or didn't feel like it made sense.
Yeah, it felt almost too personal, like it was tough to really act like a physician when I was asking these questions, where I didn't really have my words about me and I felt I was kind of fumbling through it a little bit, where it just felt odd.
Okay. Well, I want to partner with you on this, on how we can help you to feel more comfortable doing this history. I'll tell you, a lot of physicians feel this way when we start out asking these kind of questions, because they are definitely, by definition, sensitive questions to be asking a patient. So let me talk about specifically what I observed when we were in the room doing the history. So I noticed that you were doing a really great job taking your history. Everything was going smoothly. And then when you got to the sexual history part, you did seem to kind of fidget in the chair. You lost eye contact with the patient a little bit. I think that I could see, or I observed, that you were a little uncomfortable, and that made the patient seem to feel a little uncomfortable with answering the questions.
Yeah.
Did you sense that too?
Yeah, I did. It was just felt a little awkward.
Yeah. How do you think you might be able to do that better next time?
I think just rehearsing a little bit, sort of standardizing it so it doesn't feel as awkward for me would make it feel less awkward for the patient.
Okay. I think that's a really good point. Rehearsal of all the skills that we do is really important, and I'd be happy to work on practicing how to do a sexual history and how to do that interview so that you can feel more comfortable doing it the next time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. All right. Well, keep up the good work. Let's go see the next patient. So in both of those examples, you got to see feedback that's easier to give and feedback that is not as easy to give, but there were commonalities in the way that it was done using the Artful method. Firstly, there was a lot of just asking for the learner to give their own self-assessment of how they did, because often you'll get 75% of the way there just in listening to the learner, and you'd be surprised how much insight they have into the behaviors that they are exhibiting. Secondly, your response should really focus on reflecting back the information that they give you and making sure that you show warmth, empathy, and support. And finally, you do want to tell your assessment, which is an important part of what we're doing here. And you want to make sure that when you do that, you use behaviorally specific language that really focuses on the ways that they can improve. So that's our final objective, using the Artful method for effective phrasing for providing verbal feedback. If you're interested in this topic and want to learn more, you can check out these references for the art of providing effective feedback as a wiki page from UCSF, or check out the local Teach for UCSF workshop by Calvin Chow and Denise Davis. And that concludes the 4-part talk on giving feedback in medical education, and I hope you enjoyed it and learned something to take back for working with your ClickSF student. Thanks very much.